Well, since we're here to learn about us and the effect of us and all that, we might as well start out by defining us. But that's a really impossible thing to do, because us is just a group that we say that we belong to, and which group is that? I mean, is it YouTubers? Is it Americans? Is it international? God, not definitions! I escaped school to get away from definitions. Why are you defining things at me? You're rambling. God, go away, go away! Whoa, amp up the meds, bucko. The rage is so not endearing. And anyways, defining things is going to be the hallmark of your adult life. From who you are to what your work limits are, everything's just a process of demarcating, saying what is and isn't something else. And that's kind of how we figure out who us is in the first place. So, buckle up, because today we're going to learn about groups. Groups are a means of sorting out people and things. We use them to place individuals inside of larger contexts, and oftentimes to make assumptions about those individuals. Things like race, gender, class, sexuality, we always think of these as traits about a person, but that's not really the case. What they are is groups that we're sorting these people into. So I guess the question for now is, how does all this get started? Well, not to get too fancy schmancy right from the get-go, but Sartre once said that all things could be defined by the presence or absence of something else. So let's apply this to something very simple, like let's say cutlery. We have here a knife, a spoon, and a fork, and then we have this new thing. This unholy sacrament against all things good and just about society that we call the spork. Now, sporks would seem like a weird place to start with this, but let's think about it. Just like sporks, groups have a lot of overlapping presences and absences. Things that belong in one category often belong in another, and that makes them very blurred in their lines between each other. Yeah, that's part of what makes social sciences so darn hard. I mean, you're never gonna have a physicist sit there and be like, this proton doesn't know if it's a proton or an electron, and it's kind of having an identity crisis today. But that difficulty breeds a lot of richness into the field. So back to the subject at hand. You see, the human mind is really great at setting out patterns and separating things. It's one of the magical maladies of the human mind. Like when we look at people at first glance, we're able to sort them into these categories that we view as reasonable and very well set. Nerd, jock, black, Asian, Jim Carrey. All these groupings elicit certain effects in our mind that make us view the other person differently, even before we can take into account how that's actually going on. Groups carry with them a certain amount of baggage. Sometimes that baggage comes from what a person places on themselves, and sometimes that's from what other people tell them is true of their group. Picking apart where this actually comes together to create a whole person is very difficult because oftentimes it's a blend of the two things. For example, Americans love to identify as independent. We don't see it as a negative stereotype or even a stereotype. We just assume it's something that's true about ourselves. But it comes both from our desire to affiliate with what we see as a positive attribute, and also from what we've been told is true about ourselves since childhood. This is true about all types of groups. We try and see those things in ourselves and live them out in the world. Even if, under different circumstances, we might have a completely different self-evaluation. Oftener than not, though, this is a huge conflict between abstraction and reality. Gender provides one of these great hallmarks for the exact differences that I'm talking about. I mean, everywhere out there you have trans persons, tomboys, and androgynous folks questioning what it is to be a defined gender. Thankfully, being the very forgiving and understanding species that we are, we usually react to these differences with violence. See, those sorts of reactions might actually come from the cognitive dissonance it causes inside of us to see the groups that we're used to questioned. We expect a certain amount of compliance with the associations we make, and the things that topple that cause a huge amount of discomfort for us. And it's because of this unsettling effect within us that we try and ignore things that go against the grain of our expectations. Just like with unwanted scientific revelations, we try and sweep it under the rug and pretend it never happened, and that never really actually works out in the end. One of the other effects you notice if you study groups long enough is that they get really meta really fast. Entire categories like Hapa and the Cajun culture of Louisiana come from the blending of borders between other groups that we view as separate and distinct. And it isn't even really that these cultures are that unique. I mean, most cultures are just blends of other ones, and we just try and gloss over that in the way that we address them every day. Confronting stable society with these realizations tends to get a lot of resistance. But, on the other hand, all the social movements that we think of as creating progress in our society have done exactly that. From gay marriage to intermarriage to a lot of things not even involving sex, all the great social movements have really been about the breaking and bending of group borders, allowing new identities to proliferate and gain legitimacy inside of their society. I mean, groups are not all evil though, don't get me wrong. They allow a lot of altruistic tendencies to come out from inside of us and also allow us to overcome a lot of obstacles that we cannot handle on our own. What's really important isn't that groups are seen as bad, but that we question them actively and seek out the point that they become divisive and harmful to our own life. The largest groups tend to be the most dangerous and quiet in this regard. Because they're everywhere, we don't necessarily notice how they're affecting us. Like, for example, most people are familiar with the stereotype that men do math and women do writing, and we often trap ourselves into believing that this is due to some innate difference between the sexes. However, many social scientists have set out to tackle this issue, and they've kind of proven that assumption dead wrong. The basic method of these studies should be pretty simple, right? I mean, just take a bunch of math tests and then hand them to different groups of people and see how they do. Well, you gotta control for IQ, age, educational, a whole bunch of other stuff. But not only that, you have to see what happens when people are made more and less aware of their gender. So that's exactly what they did. One of the most amazing discoveries of these studies is how easy it is to make women bad at math, just by making them aware of who they are. Researchers would have two tests, one in which there was no request for gender, and one in which there was a checkbox at the top saying male or female. In the group that was asked to state their gender, women underperformed massively on the tests. A similar thing happened when researchers gave two different speeches on what the test was about. In one speech, the test was about general intelligence, and in the other, it was about math capacities. Guess which of the two women did better in? The one where they were made aware of a stereotype, or the one where they weren't? Through various mechanisms like removing the gender checkbox and not making speeches about math beforehand, as well as putting women in single gender testing environments, we've been able to assess that if you control for the awareness of group identity, women actually outscore every other group. This calls to mind the fact that it's not necessarily who we are, but our social context that matters most in some of the things that we think most immutable and true about ourselves. That makes groups both potent and dangerous, because if we do not actively question how they are shaping our lives, they have the ability to override who we could be. And when you take their presence for granted, the stereotypes you're used to dealing with every day continue to seem more and more true, even though they're just a social construct. So now for that pithy definition that I kind of promised way back at the beginning there. Groups are a means of separating and segregating, at once an act of unification and of division. During the lifetime of this channel, we're going to destroy a lot of perceptions and challenge a lot of the ways that we've been told to see the world. After every period of discomfort we have, we need to put initiative into understanding the world even better, whether that's through introspection or else through leaving some actual factual disagreement down here in the debate cage where it will be answered to. Peace out till next week.